We always have to say or give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Bet Online, who continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025, guys. Yes, we are in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds from everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC. Bet Online is the number one sports betting source for the new year. Woo. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, Bet Online has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, guys. What is up, guys? Wow. We are here. What a great day, man, to be on Bleav in Lines. We have a great show for you today. A wonderful guest is going to join us and talk about a lot of things involving the Detroit Lions. I'm your host here, Bleav in Lines podcast, Glover Quinn, former Detroit Lions player, and I'm joined by such a great person that I had great interviews with over my time. Miss Stacey Dales, she's NFL senior national reporter. You can see Stacey on NFL's networks, NFL Game Day Morning, this Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern. So, Stacey, thank you for joining us on Bleav in the Lines podcast.
Glover, when I found out I was joining you, I was pumped because you were one of my mainstays, my favorite go-tos. I could always get a good quote out of you, and I could always get the real from you. And that's what you want, right? And I think you knew about me that I'm super positive, so I was always going to spin it in a positive way because you went through some times now. But you were a hell of a player, a Pro Bowler there in Detroit, and I want to take you and I want to put you in this team right now, man, because they might just go to the Super Bowl, even with all the injuries they've had. So it's good to be with you.
Right, man. Like I said before we got on, I've been working out and I signed Teddy Bridgewater. So, hey, I'll be ready if my phone rings.
That's right.
But, I mean, you said you've covered a lot of Lions game this year, man. They've been a fun team to watch. And, I mean, before we really get into some of the other things I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. The All-Pro stuff came out today. They had 4 first-team All-Pro guys. I saw 2 second-team All-Pro guys. I mean, this is the most I think we've ever seen from a Lions team. Mm-hmm. And I think they had other guys that were kind of deserving. I mean, but then you had some guys that made All-Pro that didn't make Pro Bowl. So can you just talk a little bit how all that stuff works and kind of let people know, the guys on this team and the ones that made it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think All-Pro is where you want to be. Where you were a second team All-Pro, I think, and right. That's a hell of an honor as well because these are the best of the best, regardless of your conference. So, as I've looked through it and pull up the list here of the All-Pros, I know Penei Sewell's on the top.
I think Penei made it. Kerby Joseph made it.
Yeah, as he should.
Amon-Ra St. Brown made it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking at the order that they went in.
And Jake Fox, the punter.
Special teams. I mean, it's no surprise. I think, for Penei to be a first-team All-Pro is, he's widely considered the best at his position in the National Football League. And when you think about Lane Johnson, how good he is with the Eagles, that is an incredible compliment at the right tackle spot. So, Kerby Joseph's been one of my favorite players to interview this season. And just to watch his growth, I think when you think about, for somebody like you who played the safety position, Kerby he's an interesting guy because, he delivers some blows at that position. And he's considered around the league to be a player that has done things maybe a certain way in terms of how he tackles. But now the feeling that I've taken away this season is how widely respected he is because of how hard he plays the game. And he's a ball hawk. So, and obviously, the kickers had a hell of a year in his first season. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't know if you can find a receiver. I covered Devontae Adams, Glover, for so long and really studied what he did behind the scenes. Because what players do when nobody's watching, when you walk into a field or a field house and you see a guy working the jugs or something, you're like, okay, that's cool. But when he does it every day, and he does it at the precision that someone like Amon-Ra does it, it's really special. So yeah, I have every agreement with all the decisions that were made for the Lions. I mean, you could probably add a couple more on there, but like you walk into Allen Park, and everybody will tell you Penei Sewell is the most athletic guy on that entire team. So
well, I mean, they ran the hook and ladder to the tackle. I mean,
yeah,
you have to be super athletic and have done some amazing things in practice for the coach to even feel like this is even an option to not just run the hook and ladder, but to fake like you're going one way to come back around and be able to. I mean, that's incredible athleticism, especially from a right tackle. So shout out to Penei.
Wasn't Frank Ragnow too in the list? I think he might have been second team All-Pro.
Frank might have been second. I know Khalif was second. The returner.
Well, Frank Ragnow is to me right now. I think Creed Humphrey's on there from Kansas City, which he should be. Frank has been pivotal in this offense.
I mean, I think the thing that might have hurt Frank was probably just injuries, not being there for every game. But he's definitely a monster.
He is a monster, man. What he does, I think he came in at second team. Again, I just pulled up my list, but you guys can back me up on it. Yeah, second team, Frank Ragnow. I mean, every guy I talked to on that team. And by the way, I do have a one of my favorite jerseys. I want to show you this. Just so you know how much I love offensive linemen. I got this one last year. This is my
Taylor.
This is my Taylor Decker jersey because I love Taylor. I think he's so underrated. And I could go down like left tackles in the league that I think are, but he is so awesome. And but like guys like him will tell me, Glover, just Frank Ragnow, how much he identifies at the line of scrimmage and ensures that they are in alignment, assignment, and ready to go and ready to snap the football. And I think Jared Goff would tell you that, like, that's my guy, and we need him in there to ensure that we identify what's coming, because he does it as well as anybody.
I mean, and I mean, that's actually a great segue with the O-line and those guys. And then you bring up Jared Goff. And so I'm just going to ask you straight up, do you feel like Jared Goff can lead the Lions to win a Super Bowl?
Yes, 100%. He is tried and tested, Glover. He is so resilient down the stretch, and he's so poised. I think that's what you learn with these quarterbacks that do have the ability to get to a Super Bowl. What do they give you in the fourth quarter? And for me, I was at their game this past week in Week 18 against the Vikings, and it wasn't pretty early in the game. And you're dealing with a Brian Flores defense that throws just a multitude of things at you that you have to figure out how to adjust to throughout. So he started to do that in the second half. And then I just have faith. I don't know about you, but over the years, there's certain quarterbacks that you just have faith in that they're going to get the job done, with Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. And I think we're seeing Josh Allen come into that. Jalen Hurts, these guys that have the ability to take over the game and give a calmness to their offense. Jared Goff is absolutely in that conversation. And I think his leadership through all the injuries and how tested they've been, including the injury to David Montgomery, has given them just a world of confidence, regardless of who's in, who's out. And I think, he's definitely a guy that's could be Super Bowl bound.
I mean, this is so funny because you're giving me so many segues right into every question that I wanted to ask you. It's like we're working in tandem. And so you brought up Jahmyr Gibbs and you brought up David Montgomery. And early in the season they've been called Sonic and Knuckles, and they're working hand in hand. And David Montgomery gets hurt, and in his absence, at first there were questions about could Jahmyr Gibbs handle the load, the workload, getting hit more. But after a few games, we're seeing a lot more of Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mhm.
And so now it's kind of like if David Montgomery comes back, I don't want to stir up any controversy or anything, but I think the Lions fans, they like seeing Jahmyr Gibbs get the ball 20 to 30 times a game. If David Montgomery comes back and now he goes back to 15 to 18 times, does that affect kind of how they operate on the offensive side of the ball?
I don't think it's a problem. I honestly, for me, I welcome, because you have to think first and foremost with the knee injury and the expedited nature of his recovery for David, just how many snaps he's actually going to be capable of. Because Glover, like there aren't a whole lot of snaps right now in practice, but it's the game reps, and he's
Right.
been out now for several weeks, and so there's the playoffs go to a different level of intensity,
No
and
question.
the teams that make mistakes, they lose. And when you think about that, like every snap matters, every detail matters, every situation in the game matters in the red zone. And so I don't think you do change much. I think that you use David in kind of goal line situations if he's capable physically of that. I think that just his presence on the roster alone is going to make the other team think defensively. But Jahmyr Gibbs is coming off 3 on the ground. And by the way, his favorite, he told me in the locker room, was his receiving touchdown, because that put him over the record for the most in franchise history. So the receiving touchdown, ironically, was the one he loved the most out of his 4 against the Vikings.
I love Jahmyr. When I watched him in college, I was like, this kid is special, and he's come to the NFL and been that in itself. And so you look at this team, and before this last stretch of games, we saw them have a lot of injuries, and everybody talked about the whole D line almost basically going down, from Aiden Hutchinson to Marcus Davenport to Aleem McNeil went down. And so they were really depleted on the defensive side of the ball. And, last week they were able to get Alex Anzalone back, and he came in and had an incredible game. But who else on that defense has been maybe like an unsung hero that may not be getting the recognition, but they're really playing well and helping with all these injuries that they have?
Well, some of the guys up front, like the Pat O'Connors and those type of guys, I think DJ Reader, like you got to get your hats off to them, because when you lose who could have been the best rusher in football, Aiden Hutchinson, and you mentioned Marcus was actually injured before Aiden, and those were early in the season. And then really the heart and soul up front, Aleem McNeil, goes down, and he's their second best, sack guy on the roster. So my hat goes off to those guys up front. But I mean, to see what Amik Robertson has done in the secondary, and it was really emotional. I was standing on the field. I interviewed Taylor Decker after the Vikings game, Glover, and I'm looking at Amik, who had just done the NBC post game, because of that performance against Justin Jefferson. It wasn't just good; it was extraordinarily good. I mean, what Aaron Glenn said is, we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to give this young man an opportunity to go out and, primarily defend Justin Jefferson and see how we can bother him physically. And I thought the game plan, I thought Amik, what he did, and then to watch him walk off the field with tears in his eyes. And you know how Ford Field is, like you're down there on the turf, and then you have a ramp to go up to get all the way to the locker room.
No question.
It's a hike, dude, right? So
Yes.
This guy is just, his head is down, and he's just all the body language, like, thank you, Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you, my preparation. Thank you for my opportunity. I had goosebumps, and I watched him, and I followed him the whole way, just because I've been in this league for 16 years. And when you see guys get moments, it's really special, and you celebrate it. And so when you talk about unsung heroes, that's one of them, but there's a bunch. I love the moxie of the whole group. Brian Branch is one of my favorites. Terrion Arnold's one of my favorites. And I think Terrion's going to be fine. I think he told me in the locker room, he's going to play regardless. So regardless of that foot injury. So, man, those guys are some tough ones.
It's like you're a mind reader. You know everything that I
Isn't
want to talk about.
isn't TV and all this stuff fun, Globe?
Oh my gosh, it's incredible because I really wanted to talk about that because the secondary has been throughout all the injuries, the secondary has kind of been the most stable. Yeah, they lost Carlton Davis, but
Mhm.
Kerby has been there the whole season for the most part. Brian Branch had to miss a game, I think, but that was early. He's been there. Terrion has been there. Mick has been there, but he was in a slide. And, they've been kind of intact. The one game that they struggled a little bit, Vildor had to play a lot. I think somebody went down and Shane Vildor was in there a lot. And so if Terrion Arnold can't go, or if he can't finish the game and they have to go deeper into the depth of the secondary, how do you feel about that with Shane Vildor maybe having to get more playing time if Terrion Arnold can't go?
Well, Vildor's been in the league for a little while now. So I think what Aaron Glenn ensures is that his team is prepared and the roles are defined. And so I think the only concern I have is the depth with Kindle kind of, if necessary, needed, that he has to step in. But I really think Terrion Arnold with the extra week, right? Because of the first round or the first seed and the basically first round bye in the playoffs, I really think he's going to be okay and going to be good to go. I mean, he was not down and out. I'll tell you, in the locker room, he said, "I'm playing." He's like, "I'm going." And I don't think the injury was as concerning as they thought after the testing that he received, both an MRI and I Bleav an X-ray, but both an MRI, as he told me he would be getting an MRI. So I think that is encouraging that you have that extra time. Think about the Chiefs, right? Chris Jones didn't play on Christmas Day. They knew they were getting the number 1 seed. So he's gotten all that extra rest to be able to hit the ground running in the divisional round. And I think that bodes well for this roster. They need it. We'll see when Carlton Davis comes back. And, ultimately, I just think they take on the personality of their coaches. And those coaches are no quit. We're built for this type guys. And this team follows it.
Man, it's another great segue. Like, talk about the culture. Dan Campbell has built this culture, and I see a lot of things where people say that the Lions maybe have taken over the title of America's team, but they also have like this Detroit bad boy mentality, culture type of way they play. Do you think they've taken over as America's team? And like, talk a little bit about the culture that they've built there with Dan Campbell.
I don't know if they've taken over as America's team. I think they operate in a city that is such a blue-collar, gritty city that they've taken on sort of the moxie of Detroit, which I love. What I do Bleav is they are a team right now that is destination Detroit. So when I say that, I'm like, tell me a free agent that doesn't want to go play there right now. Okay. Right. So when they called Zadarius Smith, for instance, in Cleveland, what do you think Z said? He was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
And you need a pass rusher? You need somebody to go hit the quarterback? Yeah, I'll go.
Right.
It's destination plus because the players love Dan. But they love their coordinators. Ben Johnson, those offensive guys, he's quirky, he's fun in meetings, and he dials it up. I remember talking to Jahmyr Gibbs this year at Glover, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, Ben, he's going to cook something up for me. He's going to cook something up for all of us." And I've watched guys have career high moments because of the play calls and because of the ability of the quarterback to get it to them, like Jameson Williams. I mean, I was at his game when he had that career-long touchdown.
82 yards.
It was awesome. And they're pumped because if you have a play caller that puts you in positions to be like on a stage, you want that. And I think those coaches do it. I think also Aaron does it on the other side of the ball with the defensive guys.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much responsibility makes players lock in even a certain way. I was talking about it the other week when we was talking about like the Lions do so many trick plays. And I was like, when you have a trick play in the playbook for you, you're going to be locked in to make sure that you execute it, because if you don't, they're not going to ever call it ever again for the rest of your career. You're never going to be on the list of guys to have a potential trick play. But if we got you one and you execute it, then you may get another one. And I think when you give guys certain responsibilities, you put a level of trust in them. I think they will respond and go out and play well. And like you said, you've seen Ben Johnson do that with those guys. Jamison Williams has grown so much in this year alone that I've seen, and it's been a beautiful thing. But with those guys getting so much press, I guess, so much, the coordinators. This week is obviously the free week from the games, but I see Aaron Glenn getting a lot of interviews. Ben Johnson, obviously those guys are a hot commodity, and the line's been 15-2 this year, coming off of last year's NFC Championship game. You got all these things kind of going on. Is this kind of like the last hurrah, boom or bust like type of year where it's like, hey, we're not going to have Ben Jones and Aaron Glenn next year. One of those guys are going to be gone. This is the year that we have to win the Super Bowl.
Well, I think every year for me, when you have a team like this, you say that, because every locker room that I cover, Bleav, like it'll never be the same. Never. And that's why when you see the Chiefs win 2 Super Bowls consecutive and they're going for a third, it's mind blowing, because as a player how damn hard it is to just to get 8 wins in an NFL season is hard. When you get 14, now 15, yeah, that's your shot, because all those coaches are going to be coveted. Even their O-line coaches getting interviews for offensive coordinator opportunities. Like, it's going to be totally different next year. And I every year I've covered, like, I remember being in the Bears locker room in 2018, Danny Trevathan, who had won a Super Bowl in Denver, linebacker, one of the greats. He looked at me in the locker room going to the postseason. He's like, Stace, it's never going to be the same again. This is it. And so when you're on a team that isn't a dynasty, like a la Tom Brady and the New England Patriots and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, this is your shot. So this is the moment. And that's why it sucks they have had all these injuries, Glover. But I mean, if there's a team that has been as resilient as I've ever remembered, it's the Detroit Lions. And they have great leadership. They have a great quarterback. They got great play callers. And some of those guys are going to be gone. Probably both those play callers are going to be gone. So good for you, Dan Campbell, but you better go get it here. You better go get it here. This is your moment. You fell short. I was at the NFC Championship last year, and the Niners got them, but this is the shot.
Stacey, I literally feel like you're reading my is this showing in my eyes? Can you see what I'm reading? Because it's like
we're in sync.
It's like everything.
Yeah.
You're hitting on it, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. I was at that game last year in San Francisco, same one. This year, obviously, if they get back to that game, it's going to be in Detroit. But what do you see as the biggest difference in last year's team and this year's team?
The biggest difference that I see is last year, they were really good last year, but I think, like, when I think back to that NFC Championship game, Brock Purdy just like lit him up in the second half. I don't like the term bend don't break, but like this Detroit team, their defensive performance against the Minnesota Vikings, it was a difference between a number 1 seed and a number 5 seed. And it was their house. And they were like, to hell, you're going to come in here and beat us. I don't care how injured we are. We don't care what you think. You don't care if you think we're the underdog. They know they're going to win. There's an ultimate belief in this Lions team that they only win. They don't lose games. They win games. And they find ways to win. We've seen them do it this year on special teams. We've seen them do it offensively. We've seen them do it defensively. We've seen sometimes it work in complementary football where they've had a bit of each. But I just really think that it's not even bend don't break for me. It's like this team believes they are winners. They think they're the best team in the National Football League, and they've played like it, which is why they have 15 victories this season and why they're the number 1 seed. So there's just a different belief in the group this year that I don't think if they were the same team last year in the NFC Championship game, they lose that game to San Francisco.
Wow. And, Dan Campbell has this chip on his shoulder type of mentality, right? And the players have definitely bought into it, and they play with a lot of confidence. I think from a fan's perspective, you can be on the edge a little bit because you're like, just take the points. But I just think that they play the game a different way. And I really believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I really believe the way that Dan Campbell coaches and the way the team played a lot in how Minnesota played and how Kevin O'Connell coached last week, because he's inside the 5 early in the game, and instead of taking the points, he's like, no, we got to kick a field goal. I mean, we got to go for it. We got to go for it. And so you lose those 3 points. And so Minnesota came into the game, in my opinion, as a defensive unit. Brian Flores, this is great defense, but that team and the way that Dan Campbell coaches made Kevin O'Connell feel like we got to outscore these guys. We can't rely on our defense. So now you missed out on 6 to 9 points just because you didn't want to kick the field goal. And I feel like that changes the game. Going from, you could have been up 12-10 at one point in that game, and instead you're down 10-3. You could have been like, people might not feel like that makes a difference, but that makes a huge difference in play calling and how you play in the game. And so just talk about how Dan Campbell going for it on 4th down, playing like that way. How does that affect in these other coaches and how they're having to call the game?
I'm so glad you brought this up, Glover, because I remember vividly that play. And I'm sitting here watching the game, and like, when you think about the division, like Matt LaFleur is going to err on the side where he's going to take the points, right? He's going to take the field goal.
Right.
Kevin O'Connell is going to err on the side, like, I'm going to take the field goal. I'm going to get the points. I'll take 3. Let's go.
Right.
I think you're 100% correct. I think by the nature of the way Detroit calls it and plays it consistently, and they average 36 points per game at home. Okay, it's the best in the National Football League behind the Buffalo Bills. So you do need to score more points if you go to Detroit than they do. And I do think it plays into the psyche of the way you coach and strategize throughout the course of a game, because you like Dan Campbell, it's not just that he goes for it on 4th down. It's that his players have been given the tools to execute on 4th down, because when you're trained that way through the week, it's hard to mess up a designed play on 4th down that you guys have rehearsed. I'm guessing they probably have a good 5 of them in their bag, right? Ben probably does. And like, if the defense is in this coverage and they're in this scheme, this is what we're going to go do it on 4th down. And they've gone through that all week. And that's a testament to the coaching. That's a testament how prepared they are, but also the belief that they're going to do it. Players love it. So the guys, all the guys I've talked to, whether I talk to Graham Glasgow or Taylor Decker or Frank Ragnow or Jahmyr Gibbs or Jameson, like the confidence and the trust that this offense has is implicit. And that's what, you're right, it does make you rethink what you're going to do on the other side if you're the Minnesota Vikings or the team that you're facing. So I think it's a great point that you raise. And I think it's something that we're not going to see change, by the way, in the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, Dan's going to come in and be Dan, and you got to love that if you're a Detroit fan. Like,
I mean, that is the biggest thing when you talk about buy-in. You have to get to the point to where you're okay with the good and the bad. You have to take the good with the bad. And when everybody starts to believe that, it can't be, oh, when it works out, it was good, but when it don't work out, we shouldn't have done it. You have to live it, you have to breathe it, and you have to die for it. And I think his players have gotten there. And I think the fans have gotten there. I think the fans, from a majority standpoint, is okay because they trust Dan Campbell. They trust, and the team has taken on the mentality of the city. It's Detroit, like you said. And so my last thing that I have for you is I love to give them credit, the fans. We've seen throughout the course of the season how they've traveled, taken over different stadiums on the road. You've been in Ford Field for these games, and they are in. It's an electrifying environment. Like, talk to the fans that, I mean, have been there for so many years. They're finally getting the winning team that they deserve, and they've really turned Ford Field into a great place to play.
I would say I remember when you played there. What was it, 6 seasons or so after Houston, and so you had a solid career, and you were there with Matthew Stafford, and you guys, you had some defenses, and Ndamukong Suh, and right. I remember it being loud then, because that's just the nature of that building. But it is when you leave Ford Field now, your ears ring. It's like you just left your favorite concert. And hold on, I got to let my dog out here because she's scratching. It's like you just left your favorite concert, and it's going to take you a day to calibrate. You're probably going to have a hangover the next day. Okay, so there's definitely some consumption that takes place in that building, in whatever way you want to look at that, and you're probably going to have a little bit of a hangover the next day because that's how wild the environment is. That's the best way I can describe it. It's an open press box, so when I'm up top, I have to wear earplugs because it's so loud. Otherwise, I've got that ringing in my ears. I just would also say, Glover, I can't be happier because I've been in this league for 16 years and can't be happier for teams like this that have been through the worst of times, but they've always come back and they've showed such loyalty to their fan base and to their team, conversely. And when I think about teams that have struggled for so long but have gotten to that point, it's like, as somebody who covers the league, it's like you're super happy for them because, I mean, I'm sure you feel some things. You got some feelings going on because,
no question,
that's your team, and you're so proud. What's really special is when you're in Ford Field and you see guys like you and Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders, and then you look up and you have all these superstar musicians, whether it be Eminem or so on and so forth. And there's it's galvanized an entire group of people, and you forget about the hard times for a second. And you just are like, this is us, so it's pretty cool.
Man, that's awesome, man. I can't wait to see who the Lions are going to have to play. I mean, it's a tricky playoff field, man. It's a tricky playoff field. And, I'm one of those type of players, I guess, on this media side of things, I kind of look at all the different things, and it's a real tricky field, man. And I hope it works out, so I can get out there to the game next week. It's tricky. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know if I don't think the Packers will beat the Eagles, but the Commanders and the Bucks, that's a game that I feel like could go either way. And the Bucks is one of the teams that, they came into Ford Field last year for the playoffs and lost, and they came up here this year, week 2, and actually beat Detroit. But they wouldn't have to play the Bucks immediately. But the Commanders is a good team as well. And then obviously you got the possibility of Stafford coming back, and then Minnesota again. So it's tough. It's gonna be an exciting ride. I'm excited for it. What are your thoughts on this upcoming weekend, though? Just the playoffs in general.
It's interesting because I just think Baker's playing so good, and I was at that week 2 game that he and the Bucks beat the Lions, and Shoot, they only have 2 home losses, the other being Buffalo. We'll see what happens on the AFC side, but because we're talking about the Lions, like my game is Philly, Green Bay. Green Bay's going into it kind of kicked and, beat up a little, having lost their last 2 divisional games to the Vikings and the Bears, and Jordan Love has been banged up. I think the Eagles are going to come out on fire. I do. I was on the phone this week with Jordan Mailata, and who's had an incredible season, by the way. He grades out as like at least number 1 or 2 at the left tackle position. He said that Jalen Hurts has looked so sharp in practice, sharper than before the concussion that he suffered against the Commanders a couple of weeks ago. So he's missed back-to-back games because of it. But he has looked extremely impressive in practice this week. And like he said to me, he goes, it's playoff Jalen time now. So I think the Eagles are going to look really good at home. They have the number 1 defense in football, which is,
Yeah. I mean, I think I know this is not the Eagles podcast, but I think Jalen Hurts has been okay for a while. But I think the Eagles were in a great position. They were kind of locked in, kind of to where they were. And so, hey, this is a great opportunity to give you 2 weeks to just recover, relax, take a break, get out of public's eye, just kind of refresh, and then come back recharged, ready to go. So I don't want to speculate on people's injuries, but I mean, I think just based off of what it looked like, I think he's probably been fine for a little while, but it was just a great time.
Give him a little bit more time, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Break. You got 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks to take a break. We don't get the first round bye, but take a break these last 2 weeks and come back recharged and ready to go. So
yeah. And by the way, it saves the coach from having to be like, and I'm not undermining his concussion. That's serious stuff, but like. It saves Nick Sirianni from having to be like, yeah, we're going to sit Jalen Hurts this week in week 18, Not to say that was what was going to happen, but I'm just saying.
I definitely understand that. But man, Stacey, this has been awesome, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you from back when I was playing to now being on the other side.
Yeah.
This was great. I can't thank you enough for taking some time to join the Bleav in Lions podcast.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're one of my faves all time. So
my goodness.
I'll see you in Detroit.
Yes, you will. You'll be there next weekend?
Probably.
I will probably be there too.
All right.
So until next time, subscribe. Bleav in the Lions podcast. And yeah, we'll see you next time.